Moving on to the next thing. Lewis Hamilton, Mercedes. Okay, I'll set the table for you because I think I wrote something and I stand by it.
This section's gonna really upset some people.
Yeah,
Remember,
we'll
if
clip
you're
this
not
one and put it-
offended, don't subscribe. So if
Yeah.
you're offended, you have to subscribe. So we should get at least 1 million subscribers from this section.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that would work like a charm for us. If Lewis continues, first of all, I think it's high time he sits down and looks back at what has been going on in the entire season. It cannot be the case that I was great on Friday. All of a sudden something happened, some fugazi thing happened and I'm behind. He's been in the sport for almost 20 years now. Is it 20? Yeah, 17, 18 years.
Plus, according to all of his fans, he was an engineer earlier this season. So
Yeah,
he should
so-
understand this better.
And that's the thing, because what he's showing right now is, I don't think every time you can just put your hand up and say that the setup didn't work, it was experiment, it was this, that, because the bottom line is it's only been 4 races, I think, where he's out-qualified George. And I think 2 or 3 of them were when George had a power unit issue. Then there was one in Spa where wet weather helped. If he's doing this against
What is
George,
it? It's 12-4 now, or something like that, or 13
13
to
to 4.
Yeah,
13 to 4.
And in the races, I think it's like 10-6
It's
or something.
11 to 6 or
11 to
12
5,
to
11
5,
6,
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's poor. That's poor. That's
There's
basically
no excuse for that. Like, you can't.
Yeah.
Like, in 2022, you could have the one-off maybe experimental, which was bullshit. Let's be honest. They were both doing different setups
Yeah.
at different times, but like, there's just no excuse for that this year. You know.
and I think it's a lot. It's become a habit. Every time if a weekend goes well for him, yeah, everything's fine, everything's perfect. If it doesn't, there's always something else to blame. It's
It
only
kind of
once
maps
where
to
he
Mercedes as well. What I was saying earlier, which is Mercedes, when the weekend goes well, they understand the car, the development path's correct.
Yeah.
And as soon as things go wrong, we don't understand the car, the tires are off. It's
yeah, but then at the same
Yeah.
time, the second driver is on the podium. And he was
you mean the
half
number
a
one
second
driver?
faster. Yeah.
Look, I'm sorry, but like, this season, Russell is the number one driver. Like,
Yeah, he is.
You can't turn around all season in 2023 and like rightly give Hamilton credit for an incredible 2023 season, but then perfectly by rights, this has been George's season. George has
Pretty
just been
much.
the better driver, and the only area where George isn't beating Hamilton is on points, and that's not really of his own fault. Like, you
2
know, there's-
races where George suffered a DNF or no score was the races that Lewis won.
through no
That's
fault
a
of his
50
own,
point,
you know,
yeah.
like, so
And that's a 50 point swing.
swing, yeah. So, being
I
4
think Charles
tenths down is
I always thought that Charles would get the better of him. Now I'm worried that it's not going to be a good
You know what?
It's not going to be a good look.
I thought that it was going to be interesting because given that like Bottas beat Hamilton a third of the time in qualifying, George has been a brilliant qualifier. Look, people will say Hamilton has 104 poles, sure, but look at the cars he was driving. The thing is, if you look at Lewis's teammates, qualifying has, in my opinion anyway, never been the strongest part of Hamilton's weekend. Races have been, right? Races, Hamilton, to give him full credit, in the races where it counts, let's be honest, Hamilton has always been spectacular in the right machinery.
But the thing is,
the problem is
what comes naturally, right? That's
Yeah,
your
yeah.
natural talent doing the job.
But the problem here is you've got a situation where 2 things are happening. One, he's now going to face drivers that are also spectacular in races. He's facing one right now, which is Russell. People keep talking about Russell as some sort of qualifying specialist. Then why is he ahead of Hamilton in every race? I'll tell you why. Because he's brilliant in the races. And also, we're no longer in a situation where the cars have this huge advantage all the time. So if you're qualifying down the back, you're not catching anymore. You can't run through the field. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like Norris going from 15th to 4th was incredibly impressive because that is so difficult right now. It's
Yeah.
not, you know, you can't just, this isn't 2020 or 2021. You can't just cut through the field like you used to in a faster car. So I think my concern for Hamilton, well, not concern for Hamilton, but anyone who thinks that Hamilton's going to have this brilliant season next year, is that everything is going to work against him because, as we've talked about, Leclerc's gotten better in the races. Leclerc is still an incredible qualifier. Leclerc is embedded in that team, and it's also a situation where the cars are likely going to be even closer next year, which means if you have a bad qualifying, you're not coming through the field anymore. Your weekend is fucked unless you do something really special.
Yeah.
And I think if he's having a hard time against Russell right now, in his team, like I know it's going to start moving towards Russell, but Hamilton has been in this team. He knows how it works. He's going to absolutely suffer massively next year in Ferrari. Like,
And good luck blaming the team after every weekend.
They will, but you know, as we know logically, you can't do that. It's up to you to kind of.
Not only that, do you think Ferrari will take that shit lying down? If you're going to blame the team after every weekend.
They won't take up a contract again with him. Like, I mean, they dumped Vettel because Vettel realistically just said a couple of bad things after the 2019 cheating. That's when it all kind of, obviously it was a different situation.
I think it was more a case of Binotto. I think it was more a case of Vettel being a Riva Bene guy, and Binotto wanted to start his own thing.
Yeah, but also in the same situation, if you've got a situation where Leclerc is just whitewashing Hamilton, and then Hamilton's going and having all of these kind of minions on Twitter basically blaming the team and being a really bad look for Ferrari, clearly at some point Ferrari's going to say, right, we're getting nothing but bad articles written about us, and he's losing to his teammate. Why are we keeping this guy and paying him $100 million a year? Like, it won't make sense, because the whole point of the $100 million is, it'll sell cars. If you have a load of people talking shit about Ferrari online, that's not selling cars. So, sorry, you're gone. You're not bigger than F1 or bigger than Ferrari, regardless of what F1 Twitter stands like to say.
And you have to understand one thing. And again, one mini prediction, the kind of shit that George has been put through by the entire fan base, everything is going to happen to Leclerc and Ferrari as well next season, because nothing is going to change on that front.
Yeah. And they're going to have the entire British media biased towards them again, against them as well. Like, you know, it's going to be...
Sky doesn't learn. I cannot believe the kind of nonsense that... The way Newey put the entire Sky thing on blast was hilarious. But the funniest thing was...
The reaction was hilarious. Yeah.
I mean, that's why...
What he said was perfect. Reasonable. It was just... These guys did demonize Seb. We watched that. I saw them demonize Seb.
It's as clear as day.
They did the same thing to Max, or they've doing the same
thing.
They're still doing that. He just pointed out something that all of us know happens, like all of us talk about all the time, and the reaction was just to basically do exactly what he said, which was, we'll demonize him now, you know. And it was like, you're not really helping your case here. You're basically proving his point that he criticizes your media, and your response is to demonize him. Kind of just proved his point, didn't you? But I
think the funniest thing was, on one side you had this interview from Newey. It came out and he said these things, and during the Aston Martin launch and everything, you had two questions that were allowed by Sky had the opportunity to ask. Both time they asked the same fucking question. Why didn't you go to Ferrari and work with Lewis? It was asked once, but then if you're going to come back and ask the same thing again, it's... Come on, man. There's so much else that you could have asked.
Yeah.
It's so focused on one thing, and again, it's so nationalistic. It is. It's too much Brit. And again, if you want to do that, do it. Yeah. And you're not a global you're just not a global broadcaster in that case.
What's crazy at the moment though is the bashing of of Russell compared to Hamilton, when, like, a lot of the time when Russell is, as many people may forget, also British. Like, you know, it doesn't make any sense. Like,
but it's not from the fan. It's not from the media, right?
No,
it's from
that's
the fan
from the
base.
fans. Yeah. But then again, the media as well. Like, there's been some comments on Sky about Russell that have really. The thing is, like, I find myself constantly.
Oh no,
the same.
You have not seen the clip. There's this clip from Sky Sports where it's, I think, Craig Slater, Martin Brundle, and Nico Rosberg. And Craig Slater is, I think it was during the time when Kimi Antonelli was announced. And Craig Slater just pitched the question that, 2026, George does not have a contract. So there is possibly a shootout between Kimi and George, who is to see who is going to team up with Max in 2026, and George's seat might be in danger. And Martin went on this rant and he said that no, that's not how they'll think, because you have two drivers that are already doing the job. If George is already doing the job, why would Mercedes even think about spending tens of millions of dollars for a Max Verstappen? Because it doesn't really work like that. It doesn't really work that way. Rosberg standing next to him said, I disagree. I completely disagree. If Max is available, you put him in the car. Doesn't matter how much money there is.
Yeah.
And with that, everything kept quiet. And that's why Nico Rosberg does not appear too often on the Sky broadcast.
I just like but it's some things on Sky that I've heard where, especially talking about the wins this year, like it's like, it's like, Austria was handed to him. It's like, yeah, like you can say that, that's fine, but by the same logic, you also have to say that a lot of the Silverstone win was luck because McLaren threw it away and Red Bull threw it away. Literally, he was given the win because Russell's win was taken away in Belgium.
Yeah.
So, like you can't just have one and not the other when both are logically correct. Both of them were helped out by circumstance in those situations. So, I get that the Austria one was a bit more clear cut because it was two drivers crashing in front of them. But you still can't just completely go, well, that really doesn't count, does it? Like, it's basically how it comes across. And that I found myself constantly this year, I'm not like some crazy like Norris, Russell or Leclerc fan, but I always find myself when people start bashing on a driver undeservedly, I'm always like, no, fuck this, I'm going to defend them then,
Yeah.
And I find myself
the
doing
same
that
thing
with
is
Russell
happening
this
with
year.
me right now, and apparently a lot of Max Verstappen fans, they are not happy with me. I've seen a lot of comments.
I'm getting blocked by Verstappen fans for just pointing out the fact that when they were smashing the Hamilton fans for doing the exact same thing, I was with them saying, yeah, this is ridiculous. Hamilton fans should shut up about it. So now when I'm criticizing you for doing the same thing to Norris or to Russell, it's like, well, guys, you can't like complain about someone else doing it and then do the exact same thing and not expect to get criticized.
Yeah.
I
wrote about it, right? I mean, I simply said that whatever toxicity was, a bunch of Verstappen fans have started acting like the Team LH fans of the past.
Yeah.
It's the same toxicity, just the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the fan base, honestly.
Just staying on the Russell thing, look, if Russell has, like, there's only two ways to look at Russell this season, basically. Like, either Russell is a spectacular driver who is now at the same height as Hamilton and is pushing him, or Hamilton has really dropped off and that's why Russell is destroying him in every metric other than points, as we said, which is just unlucky. But like, there's no other way to look at it. Either Hamilton has massively dropped off and that's why Russell is beating him, or Russell is just as good as everyone expected Russell to be, and he's beating Hamilton on merit now. Like,
what's your view? What's your take on why Lewis has been struggling this much this season?
I think there's various reasons for it. One of them, the reasons I think is just as drivers age, even the spectacular Alonso, who has been incredible, the younger drivers are getting better as the older drivers are declining. That is just a simple fact of it. So Hamilton's not driving as brilliantly as he was in 2018, in my opinion. He's still driving incredibly well, just not as good as he was at 2018. And I think that for years now, we've seen that Russell has had this potential, and we're just seeing that Russell now is just better at this at the minute. He's just a better driver at the minute. But like, it's not like Hamilton is absolutely washed or anything. It's just that the car is in different places and bouncing from race to race, and Russell just gets his head down and gets on with that. And I think Hamilton, there's two elements to it, to put it simply and not go on a massive rant. The two main elements, in my opinion, are Russell is now at that kind of level in terms of driving ability. Just, unfortunately hasn't had some luck and so on. But I also think there's the other side where, like with Piastri and Norris, there's a big mentality there where Russell has never had a dominant car, so he just gets on with the job. Whereas for Hamilton, this is like, how the fuck has my career gone this way? like with Norris,
I think that's
Piastri
what I
hasn't.
tend to end up with. There was this former Mercedes engineer. Okay, by the way, just to point one thing out, because if there's a Lewis Hamilton fan who watches this thing, he's going to be infuriated. Apparently, there was a part that was broken or something was malfunctioning with Lewis during qualifying, and that played a contributing role. But we're talking about this thing in general because his qualifying form this season has been poor. Just pathetic, honestly.
There's no way to really it's just, it is what it is. Like he's admitted to it himself. He said my qualifying hasn't been good this year.
But the thing is, there have been too many excuses. Too many times he's either insidiously placed the blame on the team, or there has been a lot of this thing where, okay, this happened. It's everything but himself. And I think if he keeps this attitude up, it's not going to help him. Because he's even gone ahead and said that these cars don't suit my driving style. Okay, fine. You've driven through, I think, 4 or 5 different regulations. All of a sudden, now the cars don't suit your driving style. Because he's been there with the groove tires, with the slicks, with basically the off throttle, the OBD, and the turbo era, everything. Then the car was fine. But now all of a sudden, when your teammate is beating you comprehensively, now the car doesn't suit you. Yeah. It's just excuses right now, and you have to be very. He has to be very honest, because next season, the
simple fact is, like, if the car performance doesn't suit him, then like why in 2023 when he was beating Russell was none of this an issue? So like it is kind of a convenient excuse, but also it's like, okay, well, if the car doesn't suit you, then 2025 is not going to suit you, and 2026 is going probably in a similar direction. So, if you're not going to suit, then you're basically admitting to yourself, well, this 8 championship's not going to come then, because these cars aren't going to suit me. So, I might as well get out of here while my legacy's intact and not
because it's getting it's reaching a point where
like, and even the almighty Schumacher, when, like, as much as we all love him, the time in Mercedes did kind of affect. Not massively, but it did kind of go, well, he's not the same guy anymore. That's gone.
He wasn't.
But like, my point
is,
he
also came back with a neck injury and everything. So
sure, and there's plenty of reasons for it, but people just go, like, he probably should have just left it.
Again, they don't know the sport. They are basically very, very, pretty much focused on stats.
The problem with that is, if you continue going around like this, instead of kind of leaving at your peak, it doesn't matter for F1 as such, but the problem Lewis is going to face is he wants to do all of these things outside of F1, and if he continues to kind of tarnish that legacy, when he goes to do those things outside of F1, it's going to just not look as, the impact's not going to be as big. Like Vettel, if Vettel had to step down in 2014 and gone on to do other things, the impact he could have had was amazing. Like, look at, people forget so quickly how good people are, because look at Kimi Räikkönen. How many, like, especially younger fans, obviously, but how many newer fans, like, look at Kimi in his last years in the Alfa Romeo or in last years in Ferrari and go, why was this guy so incredible? Like, he, and understandably, because I'm like, if you look at Kimi in the Aston or in the Alfa Romeo, it's like, he should have just left. But Kimi didn't give a shit. He was just getting a check to do something fun for himself. That's who he was.
He had to fund Robin's racing career, so it
but
made all the sense.
This is the thing, like, you can say, like, I'll say stuff like this, and I know the argument will be, well, you can't compare a Kimi Räikkönen to a Lewis Hamilton. No, you can. Like, the same thing will happen to Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton is not some superhuman. He is an incredible Formula One driver, but if he continues on and goes to Ferrari and flounders and gets destroyed,
his Formula One career will be, if he ends up losing to Leclerc, I think he will. He will be losing to Leclerc. He might lose to George in the head-to-head. He's already lost a season to him. He lost to Rosberg in the championship. He lost to Button as well. That's 4 different drivers. And how, in what possible world are you going to make claims of him being the GOAT? That's where he stands.
Whereas
it just ends.
Like, the thing for Schumacher is, like, the stint at Mercedes wasn't that long, and it was clearly not the same Schumacher and so on. Like, that was just that. But Hamilton kind of pushing for this narrative of, I'm sticking around to get my 8th. I think at some point you need to realize, look, it's just not going to happen.
Gone.
You know, like it's just.
I think even if it might, you know, the problem is right now. One thing that becomes very clear is George is very intrinsically part of the team, and he's part of the very technical stuff. That's why he's probably not struggling with the car behavior changing as much as it does.
Yeah.
Lewis isn't, and that
He
is
never
a big
was.
difference. He never
I mean,
was
in 2021
and he made up
he
for
said-
it because
In 2021, remember, he said it was like the first time in the simulator.
First time he did
for
the simulator.
years, you know,
Yeah.
like he never does these sessions. He like jumps in at the start of the season to give them a lap time, and then that's it. Like, you know,
Yeah.
he said that. So
Yeah,
he's
and
never been
that's
that
just-
driver. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
and
people
that's
say,
what is
he
hurting him
developed
right
the
now.
Mercedes, and it's like, by his own admission,
didn't.
he's not
He
that
didn't.
driver.
Come on.
You know?
Anyways, enough of Lewis and everything.